joining. Thanks for joining. Always a pleasure to see familiar names that we've spoken to or met, new names that we are looking forward to meet you guys in the near future, of course. I took some time to kind of try and figure out where people are coming from, and I could tell people registered from a lot from California. We had people from Illinois, Florida, Alabama, Texas, New York, New Jersey. I don't know if I said Florida. Those are at least the ones that are Europe as well. So always a pleasure to do something like this. I think by now everybody got the billboard of the different sources that we have for more information. So I just gonna briefly say before I jump in, all those links that you're looking at YouTube and podcast, we put a lot of content, educational content on those avenues, channels, to help investors do better. So however you consume, you know, this is multiple ways for you to kind of really dive into more truly wealth of knowledge based on actual experience, and not necessarily on conventional wisdom. I don't know if that's the right term to use here. We don't use conventional wisdom. We use actual experience. Let me introduce myself. My name is Dani Beit-Or. I live in Southern California. I've been investing in real estate since 2002. I've been working with investors, assisting them investing in real estate since 2004, I would say, probably 2004. So almost 20 years of helping clients, people, couples, individuals from different parts of the country, primarily different parts of the country, Europe as well, but primarily US-based people who really understand the concept or the ability or the powerness of real estate and want to execute in real estate investing, and realize that sometimes doing it where they live or in their backyard, what we commonly know, is not necessarily in their best interest or best financial interest. And this is where we come in and help people facilitate those type of investments, primarily when it's done remotely. In my career, I have been operating and helping others, myself and others, invest in more than 35 different US metros. You can see some of those states. They're not all of them are on the list. And we focus on what I call long-term residential rentals. And that's, normally mostly single-family homes, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes. And over my career, which is almost 20 years, we have helped investors purchase over just about 5,000, give or take, transactions of those types of properties. So this is personally who I am. Like I said, I'm in Southern California, enjoying hopefully the last day of rain for the past few months. Hopefully things will warm up finally. It's been kind of quite a weather over here. I want to give you a warning before we dive in. This is, it's going to be a little bit sarcastic, but it's a true warning. Tonight is not a quick TikTok, Twitter type of a lecture or class. I'm really going to dive in. I'm going to talk. It's going to be an hour plus. I'm going to take questions gladly after I'm done with the talking, just so I'm not kind of shifted away from the focus of the presentation. So feel free to dive in or type in your questions while I speak. Maybe mention which page you're on. We can always go back to. So I apologize for not taking questions while I speak. It's a little bit distracting. I'll try to answer. I'll stay here. I've blocked my evening. So if we need to stay multiple hours here, no problem. I have patience to answer, so I'm not rushing anywhere. But I do want to say the following. If you're here and you're thinking this is going to be 5, 10, 20 minutes, it's not. It's going to be much longer. Be ready. Bring your coffee, your wine, your dinner, whatever. So be prepared for that. Right? So that's one thing. No breaks. This is hardcore real estate, right here. Second, if you're expecting some sort of a sales pitch at the end, some boot camp, some course, a piece of property I'm going to offer you, ain't going to happen. I'm going to disappoint you in that as well. So there's no No sales pitch at the end. I will talk a little bit about our services, just so you know who we are. And that's going to be the wrap of it. So if you're expecting more or someone to push you some sort of a product, not tonight, so guys, not tonight. All right, so be ready, take a breather, get ready with comfortable. Please close all other windows. So I'm seeing you checking your Facebook right now. Close that down and be focused on this, because this is not happening every evening. All right, let's get started. What I'm going to talk about, I'm going to talk about some of the fundamentals of US real estate investing. I'm talking about how to select the market. I'm going to talk about how to evaluate and select a property. I'm going to talk about the purchase process and kind of give you some tips and suggestions how to get ready or better prepared to invest in real estate. That's generally what the plan for tonight. I'm going to sometimes slow down, sometimes rush through a slide because I feel it's kind of not as critical, but I do want to go over a few things. With that said, let's get started and dive into things. I hope you're ready. Let's get started. When we talk about real estate, and this is what I call the awesomeness of real estate, the first thing I want you to internalize and remember or be reminded, you may know it, but I want to remind you, is what I call the mortgage miracle. What is a mortgage miracle? In the US, when we get a 30-year fixed mortgage, your mortgage payments are fixed for the next 30 years, meaning they're not indexed. They're not pegged to the cost of living. We all know that. There's nothing new about it. Well, let me tell you something. If you're able to detect, I have a little bit of an accent, you will probably understand that I'm originally from a different country. You grew up in Israel and in many other countries around the world, including Israel. When you get a mortgage, your monthly payments are pegged, are indexed, meaning when the inflation goes up, like we're seeing here, the payments is also going up, right? So if we start, let's just use round numbers. Let's say I get a mortgage, I don't know, 5 years ago, and the index was a certain number, and my monthly payment, it's a beautiful, even $1,000 a month, right? 5 years later, inflation went up all of a sudden, or not so all of a sudden, I am paying $1,300, right? Maybe next year I'll pay $1,350. Maybe the year after the inflation will go down, I'll go down to $1,200, right? Those things fluctuate. In most countries, your mortgage is going to be indexed and fluctuate over time based on the index. It's based on the index or inflation. Why am I mentioning it? Because in this country, in the US, when we get a mortgage, our mortgage is fixed for the next 30 years. The only time it will change is if in the next 30 years, sometimes in the next 30 years, we're going to refinance and take a different mortgage, refinance to a lower rate, do something else, then of course it will change. But if any of you refinance or purchase through 2020 and 2021 and maybe 2022, when the rates were low, and you locked it at 2.5%, 3.5%, 4%, right? I don't know if you all remember, that was the rates about 1.5 years ago or so. If you were one of those people who locked that low rate for the next 30 years, this is not going to change, not the rate and not the monthly payment. If you really think about it, it's very, very powerful and a gift to us, the borrowers, right? Because obviously, there's inflation. We all understand inflation now, right? So there's inflation in this country. Rapid inflation right now, normally not as that rapid, but even when things are normal, there's still an inflation of 3%-ish a year. And that means the property value goes up over time. The rents that we are collecting goes up over time. The property taxes goes up over time, etc. Right? Maybe the salaries, the income also kind of goes slowly over time. What does not go up over time with the base, as long as we don't touch our mortgage? The monthly payments, right? So if you really think about it, this is this amazing gift that it's giving to us, the borrowers in the US, and it's not, it's not how it's normally, given to people in other countries. So right there, everyone who understands this, a little bit of an abstract notion, should really internalize this and get that just this mere fact, that just one line, mortgage miracle, makes real estate in the US much more amazing than other countries, right? So Mortgage Miracle is one of my favorite things that I think it's important to be aware, not to take for granted. And if we are aware and are not taking for granted, then at least be reminded of it. Second thing I want to talk about, also very trivial, you probably heard about it, that's leverage, right? What's so new about leverage? Actually, nothing new, but I want to emphasize a few things. Leverage means we're bringing our own cash, we're leveraging our own cash by getting a mortgage and buying that piece of property, right? Now, in real estate, or at least let's stay in our world of real estate investing, we can't put 20% down, 80% mortgage, right? Sometimes we do maybe 75, 25, but let's just keep it simple, 20, 80. That means that we get a significant amount of leverage or significant power of leverage by borrowing 80% of the funds that we need. Why is it so amazing? Is because if you really think about it, or you compare where else can you get that amount of leverage, the answer is pretty much nowhere except real estate. If you go and borrow stocks, you're never going to get 80%, on that leverage. If you go and you want to start a business and you go to the bank is not going to give you 80% mortgage or loan on that business. Maybe 50%, maybe it's a higher rate. So there's a lot of avenues you can borrow, but very few, if any, other avenues that besides real estate that will give you 20/80, which is pretty amazing. So when you think about leverage, I know it's for granted, and we all know we can get leverage, but if you really think how powerful it is, that is something that is pretty amazing to do. And the way I like to kind of really mix it with the reality is the type of real estate I like to invest in with the leverage is the type of real estate that when we rent it out, the income that we're getting, the rent, covers my expenses, cover my mortgage payments, what's called the debt service, and I get to keep maybe a few bucks, not a lot, as a positive cash flow. So that means someone else, the tenant, the rent, is paying for my, not just my expenses, but for my leverage. So that's kind of very powerful tool that we all know exists, but do we really understand how powerful it is? The other thing I want to mention is what we all know, that there's real tax deductions. So when you buy real estate, the best way to look at it is as if you're buying a small business. Let's just even call it a tiny business, right? And I'm using tiny businesses because it's kind of easy to understand. My little business has income, rent. It has expenses, property management. It has mortgage, maybe repairs, insurance, property taxes, all sorts of things, right? We all know that there's types of expenses that are coming from renting a property. Let's not call them expenses from renting a property. Let's call it expenses from operating my little business. The IRS tells you you're running a little business and you can deduct some of those expenses, right? Many of those expenses, such as mortgage interest, the HOA, insurance, all of those things. You live in the Bay Area, let's just use, or New York, and you buy a property in the really awesome Nashville, and once a year, you go and visit your property, the flight, the hotel, the car, the rental car, the meals are all deductible. It's allowed, right? If you don't abuse it, it's allowed, right? The fact that you're scheduling to visit your Nashville property during, one of the biggest concerts of the year, oh, so be it, right? You might as well. But I'm just mentioning that there's a lot of those deductions that are legally allowed for you to use, and then, deduct a lot of those expenses and not pay taxes just on the income or some of the income. So tax deductions are not just something that we we're given. There are a lot of them. There are many more than I'm mentioning here. There are a few other things such as 1031 exchange, which is we're not going to go into right now, maybe in the questions, but real estate really gives us a lot of what I like to nickname the ability to do legal, tax engineering of our taxes, right? Legally. That's really key to understand. This is all legal. Last thing I want to mention, when all those awesomeness, there's more things, but one of those major features of real estate is what I call the side business effect. And what do I mean by that? A lot of people in my career, when we talk to investors or potential investors over the years, a lot of people tell me they have a full-time job and then they have a side hustle, a gig. What's that gig? Sometimes it's driving Uber or something like that. Sometimes it's I don't know, teaching math or physics or building websites or consulting or training, different things, right? And I always wonder why people do that. I know it's some of it because people want to generate more income. Some of it is just for passion, or it gives them more meaning, and I get it. Very good. Well, real estate is probably an amazing structure to have that side business, side gig, without putting a lot of time into it. And what I mean is, the way I look at it is this. I own a single family home. For example, a single family home. My single family home, and I'm simplifying things and we'll dive into more the challenges in a minute, but my single family home has one client, and that one client signs an agreement to be my client. In real estate, they call it tenants. I'm just looking at it just as a business right now. So my client signs an agreement that will tell him the rules he needs to behave as being my client. Pretty amazing. Plus, he gives me some security deposit. So my client is already signing an agreement to be my client. And then I have my employee. In real estate, they call them property managers, right? In our expense, we're going to call them an employee or a service provider, right? So I have a service provider, I have a client, and this is my little business. In my little business, I have to make sure that the client is well treated by my service provider. I probably don't need to micromanage my service provider, my employee, but I do want to supervise them, right? Remember, if you think about it as a business, a little business, you address it as a business, your mindset as a business, you probably operate it like a business, it will benefit you. So that means I'm not going to tell the property manager, the service provider, to do whatever they want. I'm going to monitor, supervise, check on them, follow up, make sure they're making smart decisions, right decisions, good decisions on my behalf. They're taking care of my fruit tree. Basically, they're taking care of my fruit tree. And they need to nurture my fruit tree. They need to water my fruit tree. They need to fertilize it. They need to check on the fruit tree, maybe trim it. That's how I see it. And this is why my fruit tree is growing. And while it's growing, it's giving me more fruits. In real estate, they call it increase in rent. I just like to call it more fruits. And this is how my little tree grows with equity slowly. Remember, it's slow growth with fruits. And I have my employee service provider, property manager taking care of things. I just need to make sure they show up to do their work as they are promising me to do when we start the relationship. So this is something, why am I mentioning all this orchard story, is because I can probably grow a tree in the background of my life without needing to be there day in, day out. If it's not, if anyone thinks that real estate is something of passive income, it's not, right? I don't think it's a passive income. I also don't think it's a full-time job. It doesn't have to be. It depends on type of real estate, of course. It can be on a spectrum where you're putting some time into it, so it's not 100% passive, but at the same time, you don't have to be fully working at it while keeping a job, while running your life, family, traveling, etc. You can, have your side little business running in the background of your life, not letting it go, not forgetting about it, taking care of it, but you don't have to deal with it day in, day out. There's sometimes, maybe the tree is sick and you have to do a little bit more work. Then it comes, you have to be a little bit more involved. But most times it's in the background. And the most beautiful thing about my tree is once my tree is stabilized and growing, I can just buy another tree, plant another tree, and start growing my orchard again in the background of my life, right? I don't have to be there on a day-to-day business or the day-to-day to take care of it. There are systems in place to take care of it, and this is something that can be integrated into my life. Again, not 100% passive, but also doesn't have to be 100% involvement on my behalf. You guys, I'm just going to mention, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat so we can circle back to them, no problem. All right, everything sounds amazing, right? Let's talk about some of the common disadvantages, right? What I call the typical things, right? I'm not talking about extreme. Let's talk about the typical things. Number one, time or timer. The reason I'm using time or timer is when we buy a piece of real estate with a mortgage, in order for that piece of real estate, this single family home, to really grow like a tree and produce better for me, I need to give it time, right? It slowly tends to appreciate, even if it goes up and down over, peak and valleys over a period of 10 years or more. It tends to grow slowly, maybe even very slowly over time. So that's the first reason, we need time, give it time, it will work wonder. Two things are happening, mainly slow growth in value appreciation, and slow reduction of the mortgage principal. So we have equity starting to grow over time, slowly. Second thing, a part of it is timer, meaning everything I'm talking about is completely theoretical, completely abstract. If you don't actually purchase the house, get the mortgage, and start that timer clock ticking in your favor, right? So if we're sitting and listening, it is not a problem for me because I'm not, I'm doing it. But if someone is just thinking about it, that clock is not ticking in your favor. No equity is going to start growing in your favor until you actually own the piece of property. Okay, so that's a disadvantage. Second thing, unlike what many experts or not, I don't know, commercials or ads or Facebook, whatever, say, you can no money down. I have to admit that I have tried for 20 years to do no money down. I have been very close 2 to 3 times to do no money down deals. Honestly, I've never been able to actually pull the deal and do no money down deal. I'm sure it's available out there. I just want to say, realistically, if you're focusing on that and you're not trying to accomplish a transaction with no money down, maybe you want to start thinking if this is even possible, right? Maybe one of you is actually already doing no money down deal, and is very successful. Kudos for you. My experience has been, you need some cash. We're going to talk about that, in a few minutes, to use as a down payment in order to buy that piece of property. So no money down, I think it's a little bit of a unrealistic. Money down payment is needed, right? So you need some cash. I'm going to talk about that, in a few minutes as well. And then there's what I call the typical drama. What is a typical drama? Typical drama for me are primarily the following. When you buy a piece of real estate and you have a tenant, in that property and using a property manager, the following things will happen. You will have repairs. It will happen, I promise, right? You will have vacancy, right? Properties, some areas in the country, some parts of DC, maybe parts of New York, Manhattan, some parts of Silicon Valley, and there are other pockets. You put a house on the market, for lease. Before the truck of the current tenant moves out, the truck with the new tenant is already parked, ready to come in, right? That happens sometimes in some pockets. Most of the country, rest of the areas, one tenant moves out, you clean the house, you prep whatever is necessary, you put the house on the market, and then you wait. It could be a week, it could be a month, it could be a month and a half, it could be even 2. During the winter, it doesn't mean every year you're going to have 2 months of vacancy. That's normally not what's happening. Normally, you will have some time, maybe 2 to 3 weeks on average, a year, that the house will be vacant between tenants. Be ready. It's going to happen, right? So vacancy, maintenance. When you use a property manager, even if you work with our property managers that we carefully pick them and vet them, or other property managers, you will have miscommunications, right? They will try to make a good decision on your behalf sometimes. They will think they communicated something or not, or they promise to do one thing and the vendor going to the house is still doing something a little bit different than what he promised or what he was asked to do, those things will, or they explain something and you thought, and this will happen. So when you work with property managers, expect miscommunications. It will happen. So be ready for that, right? It's not necessarily a catastrophic situation. It just means it will happen. Lastly, in what I call the typical drama, you will have evictions, right? How many? I don't know. It depends where you're buying. In our, parts of the type of real estate we do, parts of the country we invest in, we see evictions maybe once every 7 years on average, maybe even longer than that. So evictions are not very common, but they will happen. It will happen. So be aware of that. You cannot eliminate that altogether. I just want to make sure I don't see any questions. I don't see any comments. So I'm just hoping everybody's okay. Jessica, you're hinting, you're nodding, so I know you can hear me. Okay, I guess we're good. I guess the speaker is really good with explaining. I cannot draw any other conclusion. All right, let's move on. I want to talk to you about how I go about picking metros around the country where I would like to invest. So remember, I live in Southern California. I used to live in Northern California. So, for the past 10 years, I'll probably be 10 and 10 in each, or just about. All my career, I invested in other parts of the country. I've never invested just where I live. So I have a very clear methodology, recipe, how to select an area. I do want to mention, as someone who's doing this for almost 20 years, actually 20 years, 21 years as an investor, the crash of 2008, which I came into with a lot of properties personally and many more properties through my clients, that crash really had me go afterwards in 2009 and 10, go back to my drawing board and kind of take everything that I was already doing and just polishing and refining it and just making sure I'm doing things better, stronger, smarter, more resilient, more conservative, just to be do it even better than before, right? So the crash is something that I never know if I'm a survivor of the 2008 crash or more of a graduate. I think it's more of a graduate than someone who kind of a survivor than just just by that. But this is something that I've definitely, everything that I'm talking about tonight, a lot of it is based on the things that happened during the 2008 crash, personally and with my clients. I'll be happy to elaborate about that more if someone brings it up in the Q&A section. All right, number one on my list, population size, right? When I say population size, I want to see any metro that I'm considering to be at least 1 million people population-wise, ideally 1.5 or more. Most of our metros are actually that we are active in right now are more than 2 million people population-wise, right? I'm talking about the population of the metro, not the city. So when I say St. Louis, I'm not talking about the city of St. Louis. I'm talking about the metro of St. Louis, just to make sure we are all on the same page. And I want to see that metro size is, ideally no less than 1 million. And I'd rather be in a 2 million or 1.5 or 2 million or more type of a metro. So population-wise is number one. Number two, I want to see who are the major employers in that metro. It could be Fortune 500, it could be Fortune 1000, it could be other big employers that are not necessarily on that Fortune 500 or 1000 list, but at least I want to see there are multiple big employers representing multiple industries, right? So as an example, I'm not a big fan of Vegas because you do have multiple big employers, right? Every hotel in Vegas, it's a mega employer in many ways, but they're all sitting on the same industry, which is entertainment. Mega industry, but I don't like that as a resilient factor. And we've seen it twice. The crash of 2008 proved that to be correct way to think about it. And the COVID era also, impacted that. So for me, Vegas is not an area I want to be, although it has the numbers in population. I'm not feeling, or I don't have the same sense of resilient, right? Again, it's not catastrophic if someone is already investing in Vegas or someone doesn't listen to this point and goes and investing, it's fine. I am really thinking about resilient, and while there are other markets in the country that are, I think, can present a more resilient or resilience, that's something I am kind of targeting or going after, because I have seen what happens to an area during the crash of 2008, a resilient area versus not as resilient area, and how devastating it was for values, employment, etc., to the non-resilient or the less resilient one, right? So I'm trying to think about resilient quite a lot. Again, a graduator of someone who graduated from 2008 crash, that's in my DNA already. I can't help it. I want to see what are the projected employment and population growth to that metro, right? So I want to be, if we talked about real estate really loves time, and I'm going to hold a piece of property for a lengthy period of time, I want to make sure we are going to be seeing an influx of people moving in for jobs and for growth. Those are going to be maybe future tenants, maybe future buyers, but all in all, they'll, those people will bring the demand for housing, different type of housing altogether. And I want to be on that receiving path of the migration pattern in the US. There is a migration pattern in the US going back 20 or even 30 years, and projected to continue, showing some of the Midwest, not all of it, and some of the Northeast are kind of shrinking, and mostly the South and other parts of the Midwest are growing, right? So we want to be on the growth pattern and not on the where people are moving out of. I want to be in states that are landlord friendly, right? The laws are landlord friendly, meaning when we have a tenant and the tenant is not paying or giving us hard time or something like that, I want to be able to evict that tenant as quickly as possible and as cheaply as possible in order to put the house back on the market and start producing again, right? If I am in some states that are the laws are more favoring the tenants and not the landlords, it will be longer, it will be harder, probably more expensive, to get to that point. Again, when a tenant is not fulfilling the contract, I'm not talking about just getting rid of a tenant. That is not something I'm even thinking about. But just altogether, this is something that we want to remember, and I want to put the house back on the market and start producing. Some states are not that friendly. Some cities within some states are even less friendlier. Those names, I'm sure. I'm just going to say, if you're not sure which state is what, the rule of thumb is, if it's a red state, normally the laws are favoring the landlord. If it's a blue state, it's normally favoring the tenant. Just to keep that in mind, if you're asking yourself, how would I know? And almost last point on choosing metros is, even if we've done all those points, the population, the employment, the growth, all those things, and we find an area, we still have to go and see what we can buy, how much we can rent it for, and if the numbers really work. And I'm going to mention something that a lot of people talk about or used to talk about. It's what's called the 1% rule. Is there anyone here, if you could do with a show of hand? I know you have show of hand, on your end, right? There's some way how to raise your hand. If you can raise your hand, if you do, and raise your hand if you do, your virtual hand, what is the 1% rule? Okay, I see a bunch. Okay. Not a lot. Let me explain that quickly. What is the 1% rule? 1% rule, to put it in simple terms, means that if I buy $100,000 home, the 1% rule says I would need to rent this house for $1,000 a month. That's where the 1% comes from. 100,000, 1% is $1,000 a month, right? That's just what the rule of thumb is about 1%. Now I want to tell you something. If you're using the 1% rule, I think you're probably not doing a fairly good job for yourself. And let me tell you a story about that myself. And in short, I'll tell you, I don't use the 1% rule anymore. And let me tell you why. About 7 or 8 years ago, I decided it's time to start exploring another metro. And I go to the Nashville area for the first time, and I'm looking into the numbers. And I'm running the 1% rule on multiple properties in Nashville. And what do I get? I get across the board 0.75%. So instead of 1% rule, I get a 0.75%, meaning that $100,000 home, instead of getting the $1,000 a month, I'm getting $750 less. It's not meeting the 1% criteria, probably a bad market for me. And I move on. 6 months later, I go back to Nashville and I say, okay, let me take another bite at this one. And this time, I do not use superficial systems. I use a full-blown analysis, and I'll show you that analysis in a few slides that you know exactly how we go about it. And I take 9 properties in different parts of the metro, of the Nashville metro, and I'm running through our financial analysis model. And I get, again, the 0.75%, kind of 0.75% again. However, I'm looking at the bottom line and I'm seeing that even though it's only 0.75% in Nashville, it's still generating more cash flow compared to the house in Dallas that collects the 1%. So how is it possible? Dallas, I'm getting the 1%. Nashville, I'm getting less than 1%. Nashville is generating a higher cash flow, and not by a few bucks, maybe $50 to $150 more over the 1%, the one with the 1% in Dallas. How is that possible? Well, the reason is many parts of the country have different property taxes rates and insurance rates. So Texas is known, or well known, to have high property taxes and high insurance rates, which eats into the cash flow compared to other parts of the country. So if you're using the 1% rule and you're looking at an area and saying, okay, it doesn't meet my 1% rule, you're probably hurting yourself, okay? Because it could still work as a good deal, but 1% is just so at the top level and it's not narrowing down. You know what? Let me put it this way. I do not shop in the supermarket with the rental income. I shop at the supermarket with the cash flow. And I care about the cash flow, not about the rent. Of course, I care about the rent, but I cannot measure the rent. What I need to really look at is the cash flow, realistic cash flow. So when I've done that exercise and I saw 9 different properties in different parts of Nashville, the first thing I did was this. Stupid me. How could I have been so superficial about it? And that was the last time I used the 1% rule. If you're using the 1% rule and it works for you, go right ahead and do it. If you're using the 1% rule and it doesn't work for you, guess what? Maybe there is a reason. By the way, over the past 4 or 5 years, there is an erosion of that 1%. It's super hard to get that 1% in the middle class category. Not in the lower class, in the middle class category. So if you're not, you are kind of asking yourself, how is it possible I'm not getting it anymore? There is an erosion of that ratio. So be aware of that. I would say do not use the 1% rule. It's superficial. It's not detailed. Dive into the detail. Real estate is a small numbers game. It's not big numbers game, right? And small number game, it's enough for me to forget about the HOA and or not include the leasing fee to see that my numbers are great, or vice versa. So that's why it's really important not to skip those things, because things are going to behave differently from one neighborhood to another, from one metro to another, and the numbers will be generated are going to be different. And lastly, on this slide, I want to mention that I call it an important secondary. And this is not, don't use kind of a thing, but for me, I like to stay away from what I call harsh winters. Not winters, harsh winters. Harsh winters, more like the Northeast, the North Midwest, where you get tons of snow, stuck in the, hard to drive for a lengthy period of time. And what's the reasons? There are mainly two reasons. When I have a house, and I've had houses in Chicago, I have a house still in Indianapolis. I know those winters well, but when that house is sitting vacant during the winter, either vacant because I want to list it or to sell it, it's super difficult. It's more challenging to show and have foot traffic coming to the house. It's just the reality of it, right? So harsh winters are not helping my vacant or for sale house. That's one. Second, there's always a higher chance that a vacant house, again, whether it's listed for sale or in between tenants, in a harsh winter, when the HVAC was working properly 2 days ago, a week ago, fails, it may impact, the piping. Now, even when I did weatherizing winterizing the home and all of that, it can still happen. So again, there's a chance that the heater will fail and the pipes will burst. It just increased those chances. Now, let me paint you a little bit different story. Let's talk about my house in Tampa during the December, sitting vacant. Nobody is, giving me a hard time about how cold it is. They're just going to see the house. Pipes are not really bursting, even if the furnace fails. A whole different situation. So for me, if I can choose, why would I necessarily, if I have two markets, if there's not a really good reason for me to invest in Chicago, right? For example, I'm not picking on Chicago, of course. Why would I want to do that when I could go to a warmer place that those things are most likely not to take place, right? Do I really have to go and invest in Chicago where Tampa is as good, maybe even better? Just something to think about. All right, let's talk about a little bit about locally and out of state. And I'm going to use very challenging numbers for a lot of people. We have people from different parts of the country. Most of the participants are coming from the West Coast, so they can more relate to those numbers. If someone is from Florida or from Alabama or from, I don't know, and those numbers look crazy to you, you're right, they are crazy. But for those who live in the West Coast, this is the reality, right? So this is something I did this event, this class I taught about 2 or 3 weeks ago in Sunnyvale, in Silicon Valley, and exactly one-to-one. And I did some preparation, and I brought those numbers, and I presented them in the room, and I showed them, here's a 3.2, 1250, built in 1980 in Sunnyvale, Santa Clara, Newark, and Kansas City, just as a comparison. And when I presented it, the first thing that happened, everybody started laughing. I was like, why are you laughing? Like, Danny, 1.6, 3.2, 1.6 in Sunnyvale. You're crazy. You can't find a house like this. It's too cheap. So they're already criticizing me for trying to be a little bit conservative. But the point is, let's just focus on one for a second. Here's a house, let's use Santa Clara, a nice round number, $1.5 million in Santa Clara, Silicon Valley, very close to San Jose, very close to, not too far from, from Stanford and Palo Alto and whatever. Cost $1.5 million, right? This is not a fancy house. If someone thinks, oh, it's amazing, so must be an amazing house. It's not. It's just an okay house. Maybe can rent for $4,500 a month, maybe, right? And the rent purchase price ratio is 0.3. Remember that 1% I talked about? This is 1/3 of it. And to buy that house, you need $300,000, right? So right there, you can see that the West Coast, Silicon Valley is probably leading the chart, but altogether, the numbers are terrible. The purchase price, is high. The rent relatively to the purchase price is very low. It requires a lot of cash out of top pocket to buy that house. Not a very attractive situation. So some people don't even have the $300,000 or the $260,000 to buy that house to begin with. Maybe you only have about that money, and who says you want to put it all in one house, and then you end up with carrying a negative cash flow month after month after month until it kind of eventually appreciates, right? It would probably eventually appreciate it, maybe even well, but it's going to be a hard, cash consuming process until it gets to be a breaking even and finally appreciate. it doesn't mean it's a bad deal. It's just a whole different mechanism of cash flow and slow appreciation, etc. For example, or as an alternative, a nice single family home, $300,000 is actually a nicer community, probably in Kansas City, because we can buy nice houses for less than $300,000, and it will rent for $2,100, probably even $2,300 a month. So the rent purchase price ratio is twice better. You only need about $60,000, to buy that house. And if you just want to compare, what can you do with $1.5 million, apples to apples? You get 5 houses in Kansas City for that, and you will collect 2.3, 2.5 more in rent, just to show you the differences. They're very meaningful. That's really impactful on our cash flow, on our ability to buy. And that just shows them parts of the country that are not attractive. You may take this slide and say, I have no idea where those cities are. I live in, New Jersey. The numbers are not 1.5. They're only $1 million here. But you know what? That $1 million house rents for $3,500, right? So the ratio, I don't know. I have no idea if that's even close to reality. But the ratio is, something that you could probably relate to. And you all of a sudden start thinking yourself, well, I'm in New Jersey. Maybe the houses are a little bit cheaper where I live, but I still collect a relatively low rent, compared to the purchase price. And that's what we're going after, to begin with. That's like the gist of thinking of going to other parts of the country. So here is a house. This is how, remember, a few minutes ago, I told you when the Nashville story, when I took everything and crunched it fully, this is what fully looks like. This is our analysis Excel, something that I've put together about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. I have done this analysis Excel with properties personally, probably 20,000 times. I don't know, 15 to 20,000, maybe more. Jessica has done it thousands of times already. I don't know if it's 3,000 or 6,000, right? All our agents that we work with use it. All the investors that we work with use it, right? So this is really, how we, I call it a business model or business template for a rental property. Plug in the numbers, plug in some assumptions, and then see what the numbers come up with. So this is something we put together about maybe a bit more than 3 weeks ago. And there was a program at the time at 6.125. So if someone's like saying, how can you get that? I apologize. We should have updated it to a higher rate for today, but you still get the gist of it, right? So you get, what are the, box A is about the property itself. And box B is what we put together in terms of what's the asking price and what we would consider a higher offer and a lower offer and the market value and the actual offer that we are going to put and how much we expect this house to need in the make ready, the post-closing repairs and the closing costs, mortgage, etc. So box B is all about kind of the big numbers here that are part of, putting the offer together. And then box C talks about the financing, the down payment, the rate, etc. At the end of the last line at box C, you see cash outlay. That actually tells me how much cash do I really need for this property, right? For this property, in order not just to purchase it, but to get it all the way to the point that it's functioning, that it's starting ready to take a tenant, right? Because sometimes we have the down payment, which is the majority of things, but we have some closing costs and mortgage fees and some repairs we need to do to the properties, maybe even just $5,000 of repair. In this example is maybe like $2,000. We want to make sure we factor those numbers into the equation. We don't just, kind of ignore those as if they don't exist. And section D, without breaking down everything, obviously you see it's the rent income, monthly and yearly, and then all the expenses, property taxes, insurance, repairs, the percentage we pay to the property manager, the actual fee in this case for the property manager, a listing fee, HOA, we do consider vacancy, and then the total expenses, right? So we have all those numbers outlined so we can know what the cash flow is. And then we go into what you see at the bottom right, where it says financial analysis. deal attractiveness. We measure the performance of this property. Remember, I call it a business template for a rental property. And we check how this property is producing not only year number one. This is not really, year number one doesn't really tell me the story. We do it over 5, 10, 15, and 20 years. Actually, in the background, we do it for 30 years, but we do periodic averages for 5, 10, and 15. We want to see the performance for this property per year or per month on average in the first 5 years, or same thing in the first 10 years, etc. And that's where I'm able to see what's the average annual cash flow in the first 5 years. In this case, it's almost 1,500. And what is the total return on investment? And I will explain. I want you to pay attention now. Total return on investment. There's a total here, not just an ROI. In this case, it says 17.7. Let me explain what I mean by total return on investment. The total return on investment is based or compounding 3 vectors or 3 ROIs. The cash on cash. Cash on cash is, in this example, how much cash flow, in this example, 1486, do I have per year compared to, to the amount I invested in this property, right? In this example, my benchmark number is 97,680. We're going to call it 98,000. That's the last line that says cash outlay in box C. That's my benchmark, right? Which is everything I put in the property to get it to the point that it's ready to take a tenant. So cash on cash is 1. And remember, cash on cash, that means after all the expenses, right? The vacancy is included, and the repairs and the property management, etc. Right? So I'm not skipping. Sometimes I look at other companies or other providers that are presenting something similar. For some reason, HOA it does not exist. Why? I don't know. Right? In this case, we don't have an HOA, but at least that's a specific property. But if this was a $30 a month, we would put $30 here, right? And then I don't see a leasing fee. Where is the leasing fee, right? As if it doesn't exist, right? So be very aware that those things, people tend to forget them, of course, right? So cash on cash is number 1. Return on equity. What is return on equity? Every year, we pay the property or the rent, or we pay down the mortgage principal, right? So it's slower, it's less and less at the beginning. It slowly gets to be higher, but every year we pay a little bit of the mortgage principal. That is equity in the property, in the walls, not in our pocket, right? So we have that equity growth. So cash on cash is 1, growth by paying down the mortgage principal, return on equity, and appreciation. The third one is appreciation. I'm going to be very careful with the word appreciation, because for many years we use maybe 3 or 4% appreciation per year. Now, if I'm going to say appreciation, people immediately think, oh, it's 7 and 9, 8 and 9%. It's crazy. How can you depend on it? I cannot. And I don't think it's going to last forever or for a long time. So I still only use 3 or 4% in my calculation. The fact that appreciation is so crazy, I am ignoring it as if it doesn't exist. Sorry, as it doesn't exist at that high level, I am not ignoring it all completely. So on my end, I am not even changing the appreciation just because it went up. I'm keeping it at maybe 3.5%, 4% a year on average, right? Remember, long-term on average. So those 2 things between cash on cash, the return on equity, the appreciation is what I call the total ROI. I'm gonna skip for now the purchase process. I think a lot of people know that. If someone feels that something is important, say it in the put in the notes. Put in the notes, and I'll come back to it later during the Q&A. So I just want to kind of skip to the more important things that I want to cover, and I want to get to the Q&A so you have time to ask questions. I do want to mention, when I look at a real estate transaction, it's a team effort. From my experience, usually it means you, the buyer, very important. You do have an input, you do have a say, or you should. At least this is how we look at it. The agent, the property manager, maybe someone who does the rehabbing, the lender, and a mentor or someone that is helping put everything together. Someone like us, what we do, that's our involvement in what we call the primary team. And I can share multiple stories of the past few days, how the mentorship aspect, gets involved as early as even 7:30 a.m. this morning, saving a deal from falling through on very small item, right? Just misunderstanding. Secondary team would be insurance agent, a lawyer, accountant, financial advisor. This is what I call a team effort. Very important. You don't have to go out and start building, pinpointing all of those, but having at least the primary or most of the players in the primary will help you kind of streamline better the process of buying and owning and managing, etc. Here is an example of an actual property we were considering probably about a month ago. This is in the market of Birmingham, Alabama. It was listed for $240. Market value is about $240. It needed $72,000, the down payment, closing costs, repair, etc., about $8,000. So this one is or real need out of pocket, the cash outlay, $80,000, right? Numbers are obviously a little bit round. Estimated rent is $1,650. Putting it through the analysis Excel, you can see that this property is generating about $1,000 a month a year in cash flow. So it's not a high cash flow to begin with, but that's an example. And it's still showing about 17% return on investment based on that total ROI that I explained earlier, right? So this is an actual property, an actual market that we looked at. I don't remember if we end up putting an offer or not, but this is definitely something we were looking at. So not just a random property or not even just a nice one altogether, just very representative of the deals we are considering. If you are thinking about doing it, so on the line, we have people that have spoken to us, people that I think invested with us. I saw one or two names or show earlier, or people who don't even know us, right? I don't know who you are. This is the first time we are meeting. Nice to meet you. So I want to give you some tips and suggestions how to go about it based on my experience of about 20 years. So first of all, put some time into your education, go to meetings, attend webinars like this one. I'd say at one point, at some point, you probably want to stop attending webinars and Zooms and going to meetups, etc., and investment clubs, because at some point, it will start confusing you, overwhelm you, right? And there's so much, there's some people are education junkies. I get it. Some people want to execute. The more they attend meetings, the more confused they get, the harder it's become for them to actually execute. So you probably want to do like a stop and decide on an investment strategy. It could be what I'm talking about here, single family homes or rental properties out of state. It could be flipping. It could be wholesaling, whatever. Determine that and start, learning more your niche in order to get better or more comfortable or confident about the niche you decided. Just because I'm talking about rental properties doesn't mean it's the right one for you, obviously. So start refining that and determine that strategy and putting kind of aside all the other events and so on. I think what I suggest to all my clients is take 5 minutes now at the end of this webinar, tomorrow morning with your coffee, list down your investing criteria. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but it will help you determine what qualifies as an acceptable property, not what makes the best property, but it will help you qualify to yourself. Not what I'm saying is what is an acceptable investment property. For example, in my world of real estate, let's say a single family home or a duplex. Each side needs to be at least 1,100 square feet. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. I'm doing a threshold acceptable, right? built in 1970 or after. It's got to be either in A, B, or C schools. At least one car garage, ideally two. With a backyard, without a backyard, and all those things. You don't have to make a long list, but at least the main criteria that will help you when you start looking at investment properties. You want to be able to make it easy for yourself to see if a specific property matches or not your criteria. So for example, let's say my criteria says I want something that is a 3-2, 1,500 square feet, built 2000 and after, right? This property right off the bat does not qualify because it's 1,200 square feet and it's built 1998. So at least I know this is not qualifying. Then I can make a judgment call. Well, you know what? It's only 2 years less than what I wanted, so it's not too bad. And it's about 300 square feet less, also not too bad, or it is. So that's what I mean when going through those investment, those criteria, listing them, and start looking at those properties, comparing them to what is acceptable to you. And then you can decide this is a good property, a bad property, something I should consider putting an offer or not. Team, we talked about what are the key members and what's important of them. Try to stay focused. That will help you distract all those other options and investment opportunities. It will help you execute. If you have a friend, I found from my experience that anytime two people came to me, not three, two, as friends, working alongside, not investing together, just going together, investing alongside each other, anytime that happened, the chances of succeeding increase dramatically. So if you have that friend, offer that friend, maybe we should work, maybe we should kind of help each other, maybe we should kind of hold each other accountable, brainstorm, whatever. It will help. And of course, you want to take everything I'm teaching about and applying it, right? Or everything you learn elsewhere and apply it. Otherwise, it's all theoretical information, and you're going to do nothing about it. Now, I don't want to spend more time about the timeline, the 3 months. It's pretty much what I mentioned earlier. I just want to mention, don't listen to what I call conventional stupidity. I have, over the years, people came to me and talked to me, asked me different questions about investing. I'll give you an example. It's about maybe 10 years ago, I'm having an evening like this one, a lecture similar to this one in Mountain View, Silicon Valley. A lady comes up to me at the end of the lecture to ask me a question. And she says, Danny, what do your property manager charge for a management fee? And I go, well, it depends, but around 8%. And she's like, 8%? Wow, that's a lot. That's a reaction. I'm like, why are you paying? What do your property manager charge you? Oh, I don't have any properties. Look, come on, what is this, right? So over my career, people come to me, give me advice, ask me questions. I'm not saying don't listen. I'm just saying I always ask someone, when you ask me a question, when you give me a piece of advice, I want to try at least to understand what's your experience, where it's coming from. If you have zero experience, I'm not going to really give a lot of weight to your advice. But if you have someone knowledgeable, I want to hear a lot of what you have to say, right? So that's what I call conventional stupidity. Is a lot of people just copy paste what they heard. I heard someone talk in an event and they said, property managers are all crooks, right? It's not true. There are many in any profession people that are crooks, but not all property managers are crooks. So that's what I call the copy pasting of conventional stupidity. Be aware of that. Stay away if you can, or at least investigate or ask that person where they're coming from to really value their advice. Here's what I earlier mentioned about the investing criteria, how one property is compared to my preferences. Because we already went over it, I'm gonna continue. Over the years, there's one question that always comes up. Like, amazing how I was surprised to find out this is still the #1 asked question, and it is, how do I get started, right? It's unbelievable how this is, for 20 years, the most asked question more than any other question. Maybe it's not surprising to you. It was a little bit surprising to me to realize that still is the question with all the information that we put out. All right, so to purchase a property, at least in my world of real estate, right? In my world of middle-class neighborhoods, in different parts of the country, let's just say the purchase price is at least $200,000, 20% down. You need $40,000, some expenses, closing costs, make ready. You need about $65,000 at least, maybe a little bit more, but just something to get a sense. I want to give you a tangible number. Now you know roughly how much you need, right? At least a good tangible number. That house, normally over the years, especially when we're not during high interest rate, will generate close to $200 a month, which is $2,400 a year, realistically, right? I'm not forgetting about vacancy. I'm not forgetting about repairs, and it will probably be more than 15% return on investment on the total ROI that I explained. If your next question is there a guarantee here? No guarantee on anything. This is just based on many years, many properties, a lot of experience, right? All those things combined, this is how we go about it. Now, if you want to get started, all you need is about $70,000 or just about. You probably want to be able to qualify, not probably, you need to be able to qualify for a mortgage. That's very important. And most importantly, or as importantly, is your commitment. If you're not committed, if you're running around between events, if you're running around losing focus on different investment opportunities, if you don't have the time to put in, or the energy, which I get it, we get tired where sometimes when we have a full-time job and we want to now review properties, it's just not going to happen, right? I think we are very good at what we do. We are still haven't found the way to replace your own commitment. Jessica and I are still working on it, but we still haven't found the formula to replace your commitment. So you need some commitment. There's a reason why I'm emphasizing it so much, right? I see people that are just drifting in and out. Jessica and I, every once in a while, we don't joke about it. I mentioned something like, see, here's a person that's been going to our events, speaking to us again and again and again. Another event of our spring, it's already, I call it, kind of circling us for 5-7 years until they come out and say, okay, I'm ready, right? And even then, I tell them, the first thing I tell them, if you're not going to commit, it's not going to happen. No matter how amazing we are, it's just not going to happen, right? So really remember that point. It's super important. I want to give you a little bit of a taste. This is a big portion of the properties that we have helped our clients buy over the years. It's not the full list, but it's a big portion of it. You can see there's on Phoenix on the left-hand side, and there is Tampa and Orlando on the right lower bottom side, and there is Nashville and St. Louis and Kansas City and Greater Nashville and Birmingham and Dallas, Houston, Oklahoma City. So that's a little bit of, just to show you a little bit of the activity of we have done over the years. I wish I've started collecting data many years before. It's just not, we have not collected data, tracked it before 2010 or 2011. Those are the areas we are active in at the moment. We are mainly in Kansas City, St. Louis, the Greater Nashville area. It's not Nashville, it's the Greater Nashville area, and Birmingham. Those are the main 4. We have operations and some, I'd say, low activity at the moment in Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, Orlando, and Tampa, just because the numbers are tough or harder, on the cash flow in those areas. So it's not a no, it's challenging, right? So that's where we are primarily focusing on those 4 at the moment, and we are working on others, and at least one other as we speak. Kind of a little bit working on another one. So just to show you. So my company, it's called Simply Do It. We work with investors throughout the country and Europe, helping them execute everything I talked about. We've learned over the years that a lot of people, they still have questions and not sure about how to invest and how to analyze and who to trust and how to work and which realtor and which property manager. So a lot of tons of questions of just knowledge and understanding. And even when the questions are answered, where do we buy? Who do we use? Can you, which properties should we go after? So we help put all of this together, the knowledge and the execution together to help you buy rental property or rental properties over time. And I've mentioned which properties we are here. We are focusing, markets we are focusing on these days, right? I'm gonna skip this for now. So what we are all about is we help you form or decide or determine which areas to buy, maybe help you overcome some challenges in your mind or actual challenges, how to get ready and prepared to even submitting an offer. And once we start working together, review properties, analyze them, make a decision which one to buy, how much to offer, etc. Once you make an offer, maybe there's some back and forth negotiation, we will help with that as well. We're going to use our team on the ground, but it's a team effort. Remember, it's not just us or you or an agent, it's all of us. And then once we under contract, there's always things that come up. I'll give you an example in a minute or two that come up that may hinder, or may affect, or may slow, or whatever the transaction. We are here to help navigate that as well. And once you close, we provide you what we call the owner crash course. We want to teach you right off the bat, right off the gate, how to be a more informed, knowledgeable owner, so you don't have to learn a lot of the mistakes that we've already learned, have been through on your own. We want to save you that time, and we support you after you purchase. So that means 2 years down the line, 4 years later, something happened with the property, with the property manager, with the tenant, with the situation. You're not sure what to do. You call us up and say, hey, Danny, listen, I'll give you an example. A guy from Europe bought a rental property in St. Louis. Something happened with that property. There was a storm, or there's something, water came in, and then something happened with the electricity. And all of a sudden, from Europe, he found it super difficult to navigate the situation of the electrical repairs that need to be done. And he wasn't sure, he was working with another property manager that we did not recommend. And he felt that that property manager is not fully representing it or communicating to him. He called me, we had a conversation. We immediately cleared everything that happened. We have not spoken for at least 3 years. Immediately, we kind of outlined what needs to be done. I gave him a few options, connected him with a few local people, connected him with the property manager. Within 2 days, a representative from our organization was at the property doing an initial walkthrough to evaluate, because he's in Europe, what's going on, and then start bringing the relevant professionals, an electrician, to put the bid and details, and everything from that point start moving from being stuck and unknown and very not transparent to him. He had photos, he had better understanding, he did a video walkthrough through FaceTime or something like that, and things started moving towards a resolution. By now, it's already resolved. At the time, it took a few days to put everything together and then put it back, eventually back on the market. Just someone, and he said, I can't believe you're answering, and you told me you'll be here, and I'm still happy that you picked up the phone and called me and you're helping. I was like, of course, you bought the property from us. I told you I will do it. He said, I know you did, but it's always nice to experience it when I need to. So he was really appreciative for something we told him we will do. So our support does not end when you buy the property. You don't have to use our support, but we want to offer that because we know things will come up. Sometimes just even something small. There's a situation of an applicant, a new applicant, for the property, and you're not sure about it, and you just want to pick our brain and see what we think, maybe just to validate something you're thinking. All right, let's talk, have a short conversation, and get things rolling for you, just to get that sometimes assurance or reassurance you're acting, properly, right? That's also very important to a lot of people, and not just depend on the property manager or feel they're not sure what they're doing. Or maybe I can even suggest, you know what? let me suggest you 2 other ways how to mitigate the situation. I mitigate situations all the time. We do, sorry, all the time. So that's something that keep that in mind. So our support is before we dive into start looking at properties, during looking at properties, during the transaction, you know, being under contract, and continues after you close on the property, right? So that's something that's why we call it guided real estate investing. It's all those parts of the cycle of ownership. It does continue to when you want to sell in the future or evaluate selling and help you selling, of course, and buying more, of course, those are the main, you know, the main things that we help. And of course, we have the resources, the teams on the ground, the trusted team, the vetted teams, all the realtors and property managers we work with is our long-term relationship. Those are not newbies that called us up yesterday and they want to work with us and today we're working together. And we do not operate this way. We have to vet them, check them, train them, monitor them, help them do better. It never stops, right? That never stops. And we want to create that ecosystem with good values and good relationship and, you know, good communication to help you benefit from. So that's what we are all about from Simply Do It. Our process is, if anyone is listening here and they want to explore working with us, right? You can sign up for a free strategy session with either Jessica or myself. You know, I'll show you in a minute how to do that. In that strategy session, we're going to take this concept and bring it to your level. We all have questions, concerns, things we are not sure about, maybe a specific situation that you want to run by us. Our promise, no sales pitch. We're for once, I may try to shut up and listen or see what you have to say. And we want to use that time for you to help you feel comfortable with investing altogether, investing with us ideally. If you're interested in proceeding and working with us, we're going to have you sign our engagement documents. It's a 2-page, it's nothing lengthy. Then we hold a kickoff session, which is a session that we mainly calibrate your expectation about what's coming up. So it's not high level, it's very detailed, step by step. Start introducing you to our relevant, you know, teams on the ground, review properties, submit offers, and acquire, and then obviously rent it out, right? So the entire cycle of ownership. I'm going to go back to this slide in a moment with our contact information. If you want to meet with us, again, it's free. It is not a sales session. It's really to see this is a good fit. We are a good fit for you. You are also a good fit for us. If you want to do that, go to either reach out to us by email. I'll put the email in a second, or you can skip the email phase and go straight to our intake, our pre-meeting intake. It's at the bottom of this slide. It's simplydoit.net/intake. Simplydoit.net/intake. Once you complete it, you know, the intake will get back to you. We'll set up a time. We can do it Zoom, phone, and if you're in Southern California, most welcome to do it in person. If you want to fly in, you know, we'll treat you for lunch or dinner or coffee, whatever the time is, right? So no problem about that. With that said, I want to open up, you know, see if there are questions. I have put some you know what, I'm going to put the other resources here. Let's see, we have some questions or one question.
We do have a couple questions, so I wanted to go through those. Back when you had up the slide for the indicators of a good metro, we had a question come in asking about if we use evaluation cap, CAP. From George.
So, yes, so we do not, I used to, not anymore. The reason I decided not to use cap, because I have a problem with caps. With cap rate, it doesn't factor the principal reduction. It doesn't factor a little bit of appreciation. Some people say, I don't care about those things. Well, okay, I used to say the same, but then I realized after so many years, why would I not care about those things? They're part of it. So cap rate, if that's what you're asking by that, I would assume, does not factor those items, right? It's mainly the performance, the cash flow aspect of it. So for me, it doesn't tell the entire story, and that's why I stopped using it personally, right? Also, cap rate does not factor normally the fact that we may buy. Let me give you an example. About a year ago, one of our investors purchased 2 properties in Fort Worth from the estate of another investor of ours. And that situation was that he purchased those 2 rental properties in Fort Worth for a combined value of the 2, 420,000 for 2 properties, right? They're not exactly half and half. One is a little bit more expensive, so 420. The appraisal, we knew those properties are worth about 550, 540. The appraisal came at 560. Okay, even if the appraisal came only at 520 or even 500, that's a lot below market, right? That's really that's a deep discount. Where is this discount? Let's call it 100,000, just a round number. $100,000 equity from day one, $80,000 equity. Be even more conservative. Where is that equity? How is this equity factors into the cap rate, right? It doesn't. So for me, I get it. I used to be in that box. I just think that I can not ignore other factors that are working in my favor, that are representing a complete investment, and that's why I'm not using that. I'm using what I call the total ROI. Hopefully that answer that question properly. If I miss something or not sure, just please rephrase your questions or rephrase or add. Yes.
Yeah, we just have one more. When we were going over the property analysis spreadsheet, Zach had asked if they could get the property analysis. They wanted to get the spreadsheet.
The analysis is available for purchase if you are, I think it's like $45 or something like that. If you are interested in having it, just because you want our analysis Excel. Our clients, if you become our clients, they get it for free. So it's up to you. I know I said I'm not gonna sell anything, but since you asked, we can maybe Jessica, you could put later in the chat the analysis Excel is available on simplydoit.net/Excel. I know it's shocking, Excel.
All right, and we've got one more that just came in. Debbie wanted to know, can you say again what cap rates don't factor in? Equity and what else?
Appreciation.
Appreciation, yeah.
Okay, I got a few direct messages here on my end. I have 2 of them. So one is, how COVID tenants' rights change altered your metro selection? It didn't. It didn't, because I cannot take COVID and say, okay, here's what COVID taught me in terms of eviction. I will say that it did teach me a few things, and I'll say what, but it didn't. There were no immediate conclusion that I can draw out of it because of the rarity of that situation. What I did learn from COVID are 2 things. Number one, maybe I'll start by saying, when I started working with, after the crash of 2008, one of the, I call it the core roots of how I look at the properties is the next crash or the next downturn is coming. I've been waiting for a downturn since 2009, right? I know it sounds maybe cliche to say now, but I've been, probably if you go back to some few of my recording, you will see over the years I kept mentioning that, right? It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. I don't know when. I still think it's coming. I still not sure exactly when, although we are in a weird time. So I'm saying, instead of being afraid of the downturn, I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to say, okay, it's coming. Let's prepare for it, right? How do I prepare? Resilient. So all those things, it's kind of brought me to a lot of the decision making is starting at, it's coming. Let's not ignore it. Let's prepare for it. Resilient is the simple answer. I'm simplifying, right? So now, when what are we talking about? 12 years later, COVID arrives, right? 2020. And very quickly, during the beginning of COVID, I get all the property managers on a conference call, like within a month, like let's share what's going on, what we're seeing. Everybody's overwhelmed. Not even a month, maybe 2 weeks. Okay, we're still learning, right? We're still trying to figure out what's going on. Obviously, I'm talking about not even April, maybe a beginning of April. And then mid-May, mid-June, mid-July, I call every property manager of mine and I say, tell me what's going on. All of them are saying, we have few houses here, there. You know what, Danny? It's almost not a problem. Some of the houses, some of the problems we have are actually problems that started before and escalated. Some of the other ones we're dealing with. Very quickly, we noticed that our vacancy across our different properties in different areas actually went down, right? We know that right now, but we were surprised. And every property manager that I call once mid-months, right? Because mid-months with the property manager, that means they're done with the cycle of collecting and done with the cycle of those who did not collect, sorted out or not. So when I talk to them around the 15th of every month, they already know what's going on, right? They're not like in the middle of collecting rents and like they're a little bit not sure what the answer is when the cycle is over. And they're like, okay, but wait, June is coming, July is coming, right? I think I stopped calling them either July or August because the answers were pretty much the same. All of a sudden, I felt that my formula, the recipe of how to select a property and select metros earlier in our presentation is going through a stress test, and it's surviving the stress test. So first of all, for me, COVID was like a stress test. And why am I saying it? Because some of my peers, colleagues, friends that were dealing with lower end housing, and with apartment buildings were telling me, we are very good. We are at 70% collection. And I'm like, I'm not going to say anything because we went from 95 or 96 to 97 collection, right? I knew that if I'm going to say that, they feel like I'm being snobbish or I'm being like laughing at them. But that's what happened. So for me, COVID was a stress test on everything I talked about this evening, right? So and it passed really well. So that was nice to see. The second thing is I've learned with one of my houses. So I think it was December of 2020. One of my tenants in Orlando, she lost her job a few months earlier. He lost his job in this end of December, right? Good people. I know them well. It's actually a house I manage myself. They've been tenants on time, no issues for 3 years, either 3 or 4 years. Really good people. Communicate, take care of the house. And he says, Danny, please give me a month or two. Please. I know you don't have to. I'm like, you know what? It's okay. Plus, I thought in my mind, I can't evict them anyway. But he asked for it and I decided to be. And I said, listen, I'll do it. But I want you to understand, I am paying for you at the moment because I'm still paying for the mortgage. Or I could delay, but I just wanted to not have any. I have PMI on my mortgage, and if I'm late on my mortgage, I have to pay the PMI. I get it extended. It's a mess, right? So I want to make sure I don't miss any payments for whatever reason. So the PMI, I can get rid of it, right, as soon as possible. It's not fun situation. Not fun. It's mortgage is whatever, horrible people to deal with. Necessary evil. Anyway, and then I see they're kind of taking a little bit. The tenants are taking a little bit longer. I call an attorney in Florida. I say, here's the situation. I said, Danny, hang on a second. Just because there's a moratorium doesn't mean you cannot go in eviction. I'm still not going through eviction. I know. I also only want to know my position. She gave me a full explanation how, although there's a moratorium, I can still go through with an eviction. And explains to me why. I can't even repeat that because that's been a while. So that's the other thing I've learned about tenant situation, eviction. Even with all the moratorium was around us, I could still file if needed. Not everything is fine. They paid. They slowly caught up with the 2 or 3 months they missed. Now they're even. The rent even went up. So everything is fine. But at least I knew based on that conversation that the common, remember, conventional, I don't want to say stupidity or knowledge at this point was you cannot evict. When I took the time and spoke to an attorney, guess what? Yes, you can, Danny. You can go and you have to do this, you have to do that, whatever. I can't remember all the steps. I never had to follow through on that, but at least I knew if it's going to continue to be bad with them, I'm not in a disadvantage because of the moratorium, right? So that's the other thing that taught me, just because there's something going on, doesn't mean it's impacting me, or maybe there's a way to navigate legally. I'm only doing things legally within the system, right? There's no need to be creative out of the legal system, because legal system presents you with options, right? So that's kind of the other outcome. Hopefully that helps with that question. I have another question here. So someone is asking about how do I define the best states with the projected employment and population growth? When I choose a state, not a state, well, okay. So first of all, I think your question is, or maybe the question is, how do we know where the growth patterns are, right? You can go to different statistics websites like the government, which is very hard to understand and difficult to follow. There is a little bit of a shortcut. It's called national moving companies, such as U-Haul, Van Lines, and there's a third one I can't remember, maybe even Mayflower. I can't remember the third one. Those companies, every year, what they do, all of those companies, they track trucks. How many trucks left California? How many moving trucks came in? How many moves came in? How many moves out? And then they say, okay, California, don't quote me here, in 2020, there are 10,000 trucks moving out, of people moving out of California, and 5,000 trucks moving in, right? Just making up the numbers. That tells you what's going on in California, right? And then they do the equal in Texas and in Vermont and everywhere. And U-Haul does it, Van Lines does it, Atlas Van Lines, other companies probably do it, and you can see what the growth, and they show, you can see year by year in color coding, in percentages, very easy to follow. You don't need to spend a whole evening. You don't even need to recruit your ChatGPT effort. You just go on those websites and you get to see those answers. So that will tell you who's losing and who's gaining, and you can see those patterns, happening. I would, if I'm going to go and check those, I would kind of be a little bit kind of careful with the COVID phase, because we are, in a way, we are at the on the other end of the COVID era, which people, I think there's some people that are coming back. A lot of it has to do with employers saying you need to work from the office, right? Or hybrid or something. So not everybody that left to Austin is staying in Austin. Some of them are coming back because they think it's better for their career, or maybe there's a kind of a demand from an employer, right? So that you have to be a little bit careful, but at least, you know what? Just go to all the way to 2019 and see what happens. That will tell you already the story. So that's how you find where the population is going. When it comes to employment, you either go to government statistics websites, or you go to a certain metro and you look for either the Chamber of Commerce of that metro or county, or they use different than the employment center, or the greater Dallas business development. They have different names for every metro, and usually there's an office or agency that are government agency, and their responsibility is to, in a way, put those figures together, because what they're trying to do is to show off. They are not attracting us, the small investors. They're attracting a big company in San Diego with 300 employees to move their operation to Dallas, to name one, and they want to show that employer what kind of tax benefits they have, and what kind of a labor force they have, and how much the housing costs, etc. So they every year put the packages of that information to help everyone. They're not targeting us, but we're benefiting to get that information. But the problem is each region or area or metro just goes under a different name, and that's a little bit challenging to find it. Many times Chamber of Commerce will have that information, or will have internal links from the Chamber of Commerce to that website. So I remember in Kansas City, there's exactly, I can't remember their name, that the Greater Kansas City Metro Development, whatever, and they have exactly that information. And I think a local Chamber of Commerce links to that website, so people can benefit from it. I hope that helps. Very good. Are we getting more questions, Jessica, on your end?
We do. We've got a couple. We've got one saying, wanting to know how have we adapted to the rising interest rates, and how do we find good lenders, and what strategies do we use to cash flow with this?
Excellent. So that's multiple points. Let's talk about the interest rate. That's I'd say that's probably the biggest herd of elephants in the room. It's not even one. Okay. So first of all, that's a challenge, major challenge these days, to cash flow with the high interest rate. My approach is this. Number one, let's exploit what's going on in the marketplace, where a lot of people are hesitant to buy because of the interest rate. A lot of people are hesitant. When I say people, I don't mean investors, people. The real estate, the US real estate, the residential US real estate is not led by real estate investors. It's led by homeowners with a big tail of real estate investors, ourselves. So let's tackle that by saying, all right, the attitude out there is that there is less buyers. By the way, there are also less sellers. If houses are sitting a little bit longer, maybe I can make a little bit more of an aggressive offer, and that will help me lower the price. It's not going to always work, but let's try, exploit the time, and get a lower price will help me with the cash flow, and a lower price will maybe have some equity built in from day one to hedge if the economy slows down further. So that's a double win here if we're able to do it. The challenge is, obviously, if we're seeing a house that was put on the market in the past week, they're not normally motivated to work with us on a lower price. So we need to find those houses that are sitting a little bit longer. They're available. We just made, let me give you an example. Metro Birmingham, Alabama, a house that's been on the market for about 3 months, started at $250. Probably its market value is about $250. They lowered, I can't remember when, to $242. We made an offer for $220. They came down to $232. And that's where we stopped, because the buyer didn't want to go towards $230, although that's what I told them they should before we submitted an offer. And they wanted to end around $227,500. Seller didn't want to go down to $230. So we are at about $4,000 gap, which I think we will still be able to close, in the coming days. We're waiting for another offer to see if it materializes or not. We actually got an answer on the other offer that they are countering, not too horrific. So we may be able to close that gap if each party comes a bit closer. So 4,000-ish is not a big gap to close. So that just tells you here's an opportunity. So that means if we buy it, let's just even say for $230, it probably has $15,000 in equity, and it helps me with the cash flow. So that's the ideal scenario. Make a more of an aggressive offer, offset the price, helps with the cash flow, helps with the equity. The challenge is there's demand has dropped, but also supply. So when we are seeing houses out there that are priced well, we still have multiple offers. We have a house, the one in St. Louis, that we made an offer yesterday. The agent was at the house today, sent a report and a video and what they countered. And he said, there's a lot of foot traffic by different parties looking at this house. So that means they're countering to us, but we can tell there's more lurking, around, right? So that just doesn't mean we're gonna, you can see from their counter, they're not that flexible, right? They're just a little bit flexible. Their counter is like $3,000 deposit instead of $2,000, right? Stuff like that. So there's a challenge of inventory. Absolutely. Don't expect multiple houses sitting on the market for a long time. Easy for us to pick as buyers. Still a challenge. Now that we dealt with it on one way, let me tell you how I deal with it, in a different way. So I believe, or I think that in the next 2 to 4 years, I don't know if it's going to be sooner or later, but somewhere along the next 2 to 4 years, interest rate, and we're maybe already getting a hint from the Fed that they're going to do that, or at least stop raising the rate. Not sure yet, but let's just say somewhere in the next 2 to 4 years, the interest rate would drop down from 7-ish to 5.5, right? Maybe even 5. So that means I'm going to have, let's say I'm buying a property today using the methodology of trying to be a little bit more aggressive with the offer. And let's just say in 3 years, I'm going to be able to lower it to 5.5%. So I'm going to have 3 years of tight cash flow, maybe $100 a month or so. But within 3 years or so, no promises exactly what's going to happen, I will have the opportunity to refinance to a reasonable rate. I've been doing it for many years. I don't remember a long period of time that the rate for investors were less than 4. The past few years of COVID era, it's not normal. And I also don't remember it lasted, more than 6.5%, 7% for a lengthy period of time. Normally, most times, it was around 5.5-ish, right? So I believe it will go down to around that level. And when we get to that point, we'll refinance and we'll get a lower rate and a better cash flow. We don't even have to pull cash out just to generate a better cash flow. So between those two strategies, trying to buy it with some equity built in from day one, which is helping with the current rate, and exploiting, you have to come down to me, you have to meet me at the lower price, the rate is so high. I'm using that, right? I'm crying about it, so to speak, to help convince a seller to go down in price, explaining or blaming the rate. I'm using it to my benefit, or trying to use it to my benefit, and then refi in 3 or so years, and then we'll have a better time with the problem. So it's not ideal right now, but I think the opportunity, it's not, for me, I look at it, this is not should I buy or should I not buy, it's how should I buy? What's the right method to go about it? Because there's also, there's also a chance that within few months or a year, because there's still high demand for housing in the US relatively to the supply, it will start going up. Either we don't need it to go up crazily. We just once more buyers are coming back to the market again, it will be difficult for us, right? So now we have some window of opportunity where there's less buyers in the market. Let's use that, right? That window may close in 6 months, in a year, when buyers are coming back again, without making it crazy like the COVID era. Just the fact that there's more buyers will make it difficult for us, and then we lose that window of opportunity. I hope whoever asked that, I was able. Yeah.
Can I add something to that? I mean, so as we were talking about, buying strategies, there's also something that I think people lose sight of is, so say, for example, we're taking the 3 years before we're able to refinance to a more reasonable rate and increase our monthly cash flow. During that 3 years, we're still going to be incrementally raising our rents, and we're still going to be appreciating in value. So my age-old adage is, you can always refinance your mortgage, but you can't go back in time and pay less for the house. So I think it's playing the rate game right now, taking advantage of the benefits that we have in front of us and utilizing those for when we can position ourselves better in the future. So you're still going to have that equity, you're still going to have those increased rents, but then all of a sudden, when we're able to, we can refinance that and then cash in on top of it. So I don't want people to lose sight of, it's like a stool with 3 legs, right? I mean, you need all of the legs, you need the appreciation, you need the rent, and you need your mortgage rate. So without one of those, the stool doesn't work. So I think those are really good, other items to keep in mind when you're talking about mortgage. Like, don't let that be your only factor.
Thank you. Good point. Thanks, Jessica.
Yeah. So we have one other quick question also about mortgages. So would you prefer 20% down with no PMI or 3 to 5% down with PMI and more cash to invest in additional properties?
Wait, say that again. 20% down with PMI?
No PMI, 20% down, no PMI, or 3 to 5% down with PMI, and then keeping the residual cash to invest in additional properties.
In my world of real estate, as a rental property and investment property, the option of less than 20% since the crash of 2008 doesn't exist. So maybe the question is not necessarily just about rental properties, and it comes more of a personal residence, and then more factors are involved. I can tell you, for example, I don't know I'm kind of shifting now to out of the investment world into the personal, let's say, primary residence. I'm assuming that's where you're thinking. In a primary residence, the first thing that I would want to know is, are you is your mortgage with a 3 to 5% down above the jumbo loan or below? Because your rate is going to be completely different above or below. So if you're below with the 5% down, then maybe that would be, and it's your house you're buying, I would probably think it could work, assuming you're not putting yourself in a stretch. So if you're struggling to if you have the ability to put 20% down, but you want to put 5 because you can, and you're struggling because of that, or you're jeopardizing your equity, future equity in the house then I think to do something a little bit more conservative is smarter. But if you're saying, hey, it doesn't matter either way, if I buy my primary with 5% down, I can handle it, and then I have some money left over because of it to invest, it makes sense to me, assuming the other things I talked about happen, like the jumbo loan. So I'm a little bit kind of feeling uncomfortable with, because it's a general question. It has to come with a very tangible situation, not yours.
They were referring to purchasing a multifamily, like a duplex property, and that where you live in one of the units and rent out the others. So that would technically qualify as a primary residence to offer the
very
lower.
Good. What is the rent on the other side? Can you, with the rent of the other side, offset a little bit of your mortgage, part of the mortgage, all of your mortgage? So you see, then I would, instead of giving you an answer, what I do in situations like this, and we do it, Jessica and I, maybe once a week or every other week, we just use our analysis Excel with a 20% down, and then taking the same Excel and using it with the other option of 3 to 5, and we're just doing side-by-side comparison, which one makes more sense. Again, it's not what makes sense to us, what makes sense to you as a financial investment, or the risk you're seeing from the one versus the other. So I would say if 5% is 3 to 5, right, is available to you in this situation, and the numbers do work with the incorporated other side, the other unit, what's called sometimes house hacking, perfect. I would do that. Again, carefully saying, without seeing the numbers, right? Jessica, you're on mute. By the way,
Sorry about that.
Yep.
I think that's it for us as far as questions are concerned. I can open it up if anybody has a question that just popped up. I've made it available. You can unmute yourselves and ask a question directly. We can wait a couple seconds and see if anybody's got something that's on their mind.
I think it's a wrap, Jessica. 2 hours in. Some, equality 15 survive. Good for you.
All right.
Yeah, perfect. You know how to get in touch with us. Hopefully, we hear from you in the near future. Study sessions, another question, maybe, no problem. And Jessica, thanks for handling everything. Have a terrific night and a terrific weekend, everyone. And hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.